What do you do to stay motivated?
Oh, I think motivation comes from within. I mean, I don't do anything. I mean, I watch a lot of tutorials on YouTube, but not really to be motivated, more to be because I am already motivated to watch them. So it's just that I'm on a quest to find. I don't know if you're familiar with the tree of life.
Yeah.
That stem, there's two sides to the tree of three. There's one in the middle, that path, the correct path, and then there's the left on the right. And after all these years, it's kind of like, okay, I want to stay right on the right path of life. So I try to absorb as much information from two different points of interest in my life, which is music, how to become a better musician, and then spirituality, how to become a better human being. So my motivation for doing that is to be a better person and to actually find, at the core, a lot of the spiritual teachings show us that the reason why we're here is so we can love each other, help each other, to basically experience this in a material form to help our consciousness improve our consciousness, go through the different stages to become a better spirit, energy, And so it's just, I still have a few questions of how to improve that. So that's my main motivation in life. And also, when COVID happened, I was I had two choices, just like everybody else. We can use this time to improve ourselves, by digging in deeper into who we, to answer all the questions that we might have about our lives. And or we can just like waste it away. So I just dug in, I went right in deep into everything and just led me through certain paths. And it's been quite a journey. As a matter of fact, in reflecting on my COVID period, I have more personal growth than I've ever had in my whole life. Because by that time that I had COVID, I was more experienced in life. I could actually, look at my life experience and then look at where I'm at the moment and how I can improve those experiences, not keep making the same mistakes, basically. And I got to tell you, this is really has helped me in that. And what happens is when you keep making the same mistakes, you're not really progressing in your journey. You have to start all over again until you basically realize that you're making the same mistakes and then fix that and move on to the next level. So it's my journey has really gone into, if there's such a thing as the fast lane, which I was driving the other day, and people are passing me. I mean, I'm doing the speed limit plus a couple more miles, but people are like passing me, and I'm going like, is there such a thing on the freeway as and the fast lane? Really, not really. They're all the same speed lane, but people tend to think that if you get closer to, well, in America, because we drive on the other side.
It's no side over here.
Yeah, our fast lane is, on the driver's side of the road. The more you can go to the left, So that's what I do. I think a lot, and I try to, figure things out while I'm here.
Yeah. What do you think is maybe the thing that, with your sort of reflections on your own sort of behavior and development, what do you think is the thing that you're proudest of that you've changed in your life, or happiest about that you?
Oh, yeah. And this was a burning question, because I grew up Catholic, and religion was a very, very big part of, I'm Cuban, the Latin community, religion, Catholicism was a big part. So it was kind of like you'd lead your life a certain way. And then we always have, the option of like, well, but on Sunday, if you're a sinner, you can confess and you got a clean slate, going like, Really, that's way too easy. No. This sounds like some kind of a scam to me. Okay, so basically, I grew up really confused about having free will, and of course, this is all my perception. My perception. Everything that I'm talking to you about is my perception from having gathered information and filter it, and I'm keeping this and I'm letting go of that. But I hear other people's perceptions and experiences. You know, it's like when you go to school, you sit there and you might even read a textbook, or the teacher is going to bring something up. You're not going to agree with 100% of what the teacher is saying, or you might be reading in the book. And if you do, you have a problem because you're being programmed, and that's one thing that I am very aware of nowadays. Programming on whether you're watching the television, you're listening to the radio, you're being programmed at school, you're being programmed at home. It's like at some point you got to say, wait a minute, where's my free will here? My free will to do, not to become a robot or a piece of software that's being downloaded into my brain, and I'm starting to follow everybody's perception of what I should do and who I should be. No, at some point you have to like become an individual. You should become. Again, I don't want to program anybody to think that you have to. If you ask me, since you're asking me questions, and I'm giving you my perception of how I live my life, and I've always asked a lot of questions, which is why it did not sit very well with the priests back in Cuba. I was asking them a lot of questions, and it was kind of like, you don't understand, you're too young, or this is not the place to ask all of that. So if I cannot ask a priest about my religious questions, who else can I ask? But that's how they got away with things, back then. And my quest has been all this time to sort this whole thing out about free will. What is free will? What are the limits? And then I came up on a self-realization, which is my perception at the moment today. And I really doubt if it's going to change, because I think I found something that I'm at peace with, which is basically free will is you have two options with will. And there is God's will, which is the structure, the plan. This is I've been studying quantum physics, the quantum field, and there is an order to things. There's an order to nature, and we are part of nature. There's an order to the universe. There's an order to everything that exists. We're basically fractals of a special order, and we're just one bit connected that will create more fractals at some point. And there's that, again, going back to my perception, there is God's will, the order of things, or there's your free will to create chaos, which is everything else that is not part of that, like in the tree of life, that in the middle stem going all the way up.
Yeah, it's that whole kind of free will conversation I find so interesting, because you sort of I never know how much free will I think I have. Is it all an illusion, or do I have some control over things? Nowadays there are so many things trying to nudge you in one direction or another that it's hard to feel like you have control over things sometimes. Do you think the way things like technology are, and the way that we interact nowadays, do you think it's maybe harder to maintain that sense of free will? That's a good question. Really great question. I believe free will has been here since day one. So, the technology that we have available today is just a tool. And if you're going to talk about technology, go back to the Egyptians. You got something like, let's say, let me get rid of this. Oh. Hold on. Speaking of technology.
Okay. Speaking of technology, yes. Yes, and you know what? I'm gonna well, I can't because I'm using G 5G to for us to connect here. So, anyways, it's speaking of technology, it's just a tool. I mean, if you go back to like thousands of years ago and you study the technology that the Egyptians, had available to them, and when I say had available to them, because one of the things that I study is where did that technology come from? And a lot of the speakers that I listen to, they speak about most probably came from extraterrestrial technology that they were using, and then they ask, where are they? Whatever happened to that culture, to that knowledge that now, if it wasn't for the Rosetta Stone that Napoleon, he was on a quest, to find out all these things, especially having to do with Egypt. They found out the Rosetta Stone, and the Rosetta Stone is engraved in different languages, and one of them, I believe, happened to be Greek. And one of the soldiers with Napoleon could read Greek, and so everything equates all of the different. So you have hieroglyphics that actually they're translated into Greek, right? So now that was like the beginning of people being able to translate what hieroglyphics are saying, and there's so much technology that they had developed or available to them, a lot of the professors of quantum physics, that deal with the history of Egypt as a culture and the science that they were using is beyond what we have available right now.
Well, yeah, I'm so sort of. These are the sort of things that if someone asked me to elaborate on them, I'd just be like, this is out of my out of my what's the word field of understanding. But I find the whole concept of free will interesting. That whole
Mm-hmm.
discussion. The kind of something that I was in sort of intrigued to ask. It kind of tying. It sort of does tie in some way. Is that when people have obviously their own freedom of choice to act in the way that they want. This is kind of sort of tying it back with music, but also not, because I know obviously back in your time with, for example, with Ozzy, but when you were sort of playing with him, obviously he had the freedom of will, for example, to, I don't know, have a lot of problems with, for example, like drugs or something like that, or alcohol, and then that obviously can affect other people. And I think my question was kind of, and I think I've heard you kind of talk, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I've heard you talk about him being a bit difficult at the time to work with, with his problems like that. And I guess my question is, how do you kind of help someone who's making those choices to sort of help themselves, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Okay. In our case, one of the reasons why I got the gig was because I did not have a drug problem or an alcohol problem. And I think, to put it in a nutshell, what you do is you surround the person with a problem with people that do not have problems. That way they're not a bad influence or a worse influence, on these people. Or what do you call that word when you actually supply them with stuff? There's a certain term.
Oh, what you mean, enabler?
Enabler. Yeah, you don't become an enabler to the individual. As a matter of fact, I got to give Sharon credit. I mean, I give her so much credit completely, but one of the things that I really credit her with is doing a daily intervention with Ozzy, just to keep him alive. It wasn't even a matter of, yes, we had gigs to do, but it's like, I mean, she really cared. She cared for everybody on that tour, but of course, it's a special bond with Ozzy that led to them being married, and she really took care of him, as much as she could, as much more than I've seen any other human being being able to try to help an individual that has an addiction. I've been sober for 25 years. I just celebrated my sober birthday, November 29th. And it's just recently that I joined AA. So I do hear a lot of stories and, people that share um, their journey, towards sobriety. And just, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, as far as I know, Ozzy was never homeless. So Ozzy, he always had a roof over his head. He's been in a band since he was 16 years old, been on tour. So it was kind of like a functioning uh, alcoholic or drug addict. He still functioned. He was still a part of society and being able to, and he had a job. Which is very different from people that just go completely homeless and then they take that step towards sobriety and they become part of the AA program and they come on and they do shares and these are successful individuals.
I find it so difficult in life to find that balance of and I mean this is just regarding anyone really in life of like wanting to help someone, but where do you draw that line where you need to look after yourself? I feel like sometimes when I'm trying to help other people, if they don't want to help themselves to improve in some way, and I'm not trying to sound all all knowing. Obviously, I have my flaws, and there are probably plenty of people that feel like they couldn't help me. But it's difficult. I never know where to draw that line because it really can sort of bring you down, can't it? Like that kind of sense of like, oh, I'm trying to help this person, but it's not. I can't ultimately have freedom of choice to do what they do.
I think it's just a matter of timing. There's like they always, they talk about in the program about people, you have to hit rock bottom. You cannot really help the person on the way down because they don't need the help yet. Once they hit rock bottom, they will turn to you if you are still there by their side and you become part of their path towards recovery, which is also the reason why we're here as human beings. We're here to help each other in so many different levels, but that being one of the main one, which is helping each other to find our path, our free will to do God's will.
Yeah. And it seems because it's funny. I always feel a bit stupid when I speak to people and ask if they'd like to come on the podcast, and then not realize until I do that they themselves have a podcast. And I was I was having a brief listen to you on with Joey Diaz. Got a cool guest on, but on the whole, are you? It sounds like you're very proactively interested in sort of self-discovery and these kind of things. Well, is there anything in life that's prompted you to show an interest in sort of introspection and reflecting on life in that way? I mean, like without asking too personal a question, are there things that have sort of forced you to go, oh, okay, I need to figure something out now to send my life in the right direction, sort of thing?
Well, it's there's been some events. It's been some events, but ever since I was a kid, I was always on a quest to. I always had questions, and not always the right people, because that's one thing. If you got questions, you got to ask the right person for the answers that you're looking for. Otherwise, you're going to get a lie and not a fact of this person's experience. Because a lot of people make things up just so they don't say, I don't know. To say I don't know, it's. I find a lot of people that it's very hard for them to say I don't know, and it's just the more I realize that, the more I really say, you know what, I really don't know. I can give you an opinion based on no experience whatsoever, so there's no validity to it. It's just a perception based on the fact that I don't know, but I think it might be something. You know what I mean? So I am very careful with who I actually seek knowledge with. And I've become really good at sifting it out. Sifting it meaning like, okay, this person is willing to share their own perceptions, but it's not really based on knowledge or experience. It's just based on an opinion. There's two things, opinions and facts, and, and sometimes I piss people off, in my family, because they ask me for an answer and I say, okay, I'm going to give you an opinion because I really don't know. So I'm truthful for them. And most of the times, what people want is validation of their own opinion before they even experience whatever they're asking about. You know what I mean? And to me, that is a bit dangerous because it's like the blind leading the blind regarding whatever the subject matter might be, because the person that's asking you, they don't know. And they're asking you, me, that I don't know. So we're both going to be like, well, I really don't know, but I think we should go this way. Now we have no idea where we're going because the decision has been based on logic rather than an experience or a reference, previous reference to what we're about to do. But sometimes that's how you discover things. So if you actually go forward saying, okay, I don't know where I'm going, but we're going to find out once we get there.
Yeah. How do you figure out in life who are the people that you trust to listen to?
Oh, to listen to. Ooh. I got to the point that I really don't even trust the voices in my head. Okay, and I'll tell you why. I have made a lot of really bad decisions in my life because I used to, like, if let's say something came up, somebody called me up on the phone and say, "Hey, do you want to do this?" Basically, it's some music related project or whatever, or join a band or something like that. The first thought that will come to my head, that's what I would go with, rather than to meditate on it. And then, when I became part of the AA program, I realized that even though I am sober, I still can make alcoholic decisions. Think like an alcoholic. And I thought, wow, this is, I didn't even realize that I was making alcoholic decisions, all these bad, and I look back on my life, oh my God. And most of them, they were corrected because I got a second chance, which is very rare. That leads me to believe, okay, is this free will or is this destiny that I am destined to do this, even though I have made originally a bad decision by turning it down, right? And so I am very careful nowadays. I meditate or anything. So if somebody sends me an email, I do not answer right away. No, because depending on the mood of the moment, that's going to be my response rather than, okay, I go, this is an email, this is the content, I'm going to meditate on it, and then the next day I'm ready to respond.
Yeah. So that kind of avoiding the spontaneity and having some patience, that's quite a tricky thing. I'm always so tempted to send that email or to like do the thing in the moment. I think it's the nature of modern life. We're expected just to, if you get a text, people expect you to reply straight away. I've had actually discussions with more than one person where I've said to them, I'm not going to respond to you right now because I'm not going to give you a useful response right now, and they've got properly mad at me before, some of these people, because they're like, no, just tell me, I want to know what you think. It's like, what I tell you now isn't what I think. It's me being angry, it's me just responding in the moment. And a lot of people, I found it's been really difficult to just stand my ground on that one, and just say, no, I'm not gonna, it's like, I acknowledge what you said, but I'm not gonna give you the information that I'm thinking right now because it's not going to help in any way. I think that's a really difficult thing to do. Again, I'm not professing to be some super sort of all-knowing, person, but I do think some people maybe could benefit from that, just that ability to sit back. Like back before telephones, if you got a letter, it's not like you could just, you couldn't just respond straight away. Even if you did respond straight away, it'd take a while to get to them, and you might realize your mistake before they even got it. So,
oh yeah, I mean, Twitter it's responsible for more anger, and I'm not talking about. I'm talking about the technology itself. and how people are using it. It's like, for example, you create, somebody invented a knife. A knife could be to help you cook, cut the meat, eat and stuff, or to kill people. That's one of the main uses of a knife. And so it's not the instrument itself, it's how it's being used. And Twitter to me has become the biggest vehicle there is for venting out anger from individuals across the board, and I'm very careful not to use it that way.
Have you ever caught yourself kind of venting or getting angry and just having to step back and go like, no, I need to pause for a minute?
Yeah, not on social media. I am very careful with that because it should be social, not antisocial. And anytime that you put on a negative post, and if I ever do, the only time I get political is about communism, because I am a victim of communism, just like many other millions of Cubans who had to fled the island. And that's the only time. If somebody, if somebody asks me about something having to do with communism, I will respond because I'm talking from experience. This is not an opinion. This is not something I've read. This is something I've lived. So it's different. It's coming from a different place. It's fact. I'm not being angry. I'm not venting. I'm sharing my personal experiences with a certain political thought. Because to be honest with you, the whole concept of communism as created by, let's say, Karl Marx, Marxism, and then practiced later on, in Russia. Russia's having its own problems, because and again, they're going back to politics that I really want to stay away from. But there's it's usually just one person. It's like maybe not even a 1% of the country who's in charge of the government that make these decisions, really bad decisions on behalf of a whole country that reflects on the whole country. And usually not just on that individual. Fortunately, we can pin it down this time to Putin, right? That's what's going on. I have a lot of Russian friends. I've toured Russia intensely, come from Kamchatka all the way to, St. Petersburg, Moscow, from one end to the other. Wonderful people. I love the Russian people. I really do. The people, the population. I am not friends with anybody in the government. It has nothing to do with me. I go there as an entertainer. People love our music because during communism, you couldn't play that. You couldn't even listen to a record about rock and roll. Rock and roll record during the communist period, known as the communist period. In Russia. So it's a failed system, communism, that at the cradle of communism, Russia doesn't really acknowledge themselves as being communist anymore. They got something else going on, but it's not communism. But other countries do. China has their own Mao Zedong, way of doing their communism, and then you got Korea, you still have Cuba, you still have Venezuela, all these other countries where it is not the best way to live. A lot of people are still fleeing or trying to get out of these countries, with the exception maybe China.
Yeah, I never know it's so hard to know how, because obviously our perceptions are so, like you said, they're so warped by what we see in the media and things that it's like if you were to only watch Fox News or only watch, is it CNN? Is that kind of the opposite, I guess, to Fox News? I think that's MSNBC. I can't. It's all different here, isn't it? I have a completely different outlook on life, so I never know what to. That's why I almost try not to have too strong an opinion, not because I don't care. Because I just think my opinion could so readily be swayed by these things that I don't know if I trust. Or actually, I probably don't.
If you follow the concept of the tree of life, which is, life being in the middle, the correct path. And then you got the two ends, the material and the spiritual. With me, it's the same thing with any political system like we have in the United States. You have two parties. You got the right and the left. If physics shows you that if you throw an object, let's say a boomerang, that only has the right or left, it's going to come back and hit you in the ass. It's not going to go forward. It's just going to loop itself around. So we need something in the middle. I am not very familiar with the political structure of the UK, so I'm not gonna, what I'm saying has no reflection on in your country. But I'm talking about our system here. We need something in the middle, because you can, like an arrow, unless you have a point, it ain't gonna really, it's gonna be dull. It's not going to penetrate where that arrow is flying towards. It's just going to hit something and bounce right out, because it has no middle. You need a middle in order to move forward, to progress as humanity. And we need that. We need a third party, a really strong third party, ideas from the left and ideas from the right that are in alignment with the middle to move forward.
The funny thing is, like, as soon as you say that, all I can think is, I'd probably vote for the middle one, So I imagine there's a lot of people. I mean, probably in a good way. There's probably a lot of people that, if that existed, would vote for that, which maybe indicates that it shouldn't be there. But in the kind of I guess this kind of relates in some way when we were talking about technology and just the modern life. How do you think you would say? So I'm 25 and I'm sort of competing, so I'm a guitarist, as well as doing this sort of podcast, and it does very much feel like a competition with everything online. There's so much out there and so many amazing players. When you sort of observe what's going on with sort of younger people in the music world, how do you think you would have fared, and how would you have dealt with this whole environment if it were the same when you were sort of growing as a musician?
Well, I'm still growing as a musician, which is basically the point that I'm trying to get at. There seems to be, because first of all, I am not a 20, 25-year-old trying to make it in the music industry. So this is just an observation. It's an opinion. My opinion is, and I can go back and give you facts, but we're talking about today's generation of musicians. And this is just an opinion. Okay, my opinion is that there seems to be such instant gratification. By that I mean so many young ones pop up, and what's happening is, and this is I am aware of firsthand, there's less venues for musicians to hone in their craft, whether it's songwriting, whether it's performance, how to relate to a crowd, all of that, especially for front men and women. And they seem to be underdeveloped. When I see them on television performing, they're missing something, whether it's honesty or they're missing that human element to be able to connect, even through the TV or whatever, you're watching it, like iPhone or whatever device. This is something that, for example, let's say the Beatles. And this is something that this is not just an opinion. This is something how it affected me to watch them perform. The Beatles had been together and playing for a while as a band. And one of the things that, have you watched the documentary Let It Be?
No, I haven't. I've been meaning to.
Yeah, it's brilliant for many reasons, but one that I understood immediately once I watched it, because it starts with them in a huge movie hangar set, stage, and they're all together. This is a huge place, and they're like this. They're like sitting across from each other, right? Then they move it on to another place, and they're still in the same position. They perform on top of the rooftop of Apple, and they're gathered together. And if you look at any photos of the Beatles as performers, they're always about the same distance from each other, very close. That took them back to the cavern and took them back to like the Star Club where they played in Hamburg. Very connected. Which by connection I mean, again, I'm going into quantum physics territory. We have a resonance, a vibration, an energy field that according to the average person has about 3 feet away from their body. Like when you go to a live show, you're going to be sitting or standing or sitting next to somebody, and you're going to be cross-fading with the same vibration. You guys, you both of you are there for the same purpose, which is to watch this performance. So you're already resonating with that, right? Now, to be on stage that close, you cannot help it but to be cross-fading into each other's field. And what the Beatles did, they would change. Lennon would be singing on one microphone, and then the two, Harrison and McCartney, singing on one microphone. Again, cross-fading. The harmonies, they were so together. And this is one thing that I find as performers today, they start playing stadiums. And the only thing that unites them is the image on the gigantic screen in the stadium. They're not really being united as musicians on stage. There's no unity. There's no crossfading of that energy. So it's a whole completely different experience than the standard experience that we used to have even 30, 40 years ago.
Do you think from your sort of being in quite a few different bands, like particularly touring with quite a few bands, what do you think you've sort of learned and developed from interacting in that way with different groups of people that have all in their respective ways become very sort of successful? How have you changed from those kind of interactions and experiences?
Ooh, that's more, even though it was an inward progression, learning about myself and enriching myself with new information and experiences, I pretty much remained the same person seeking answers and coming up with new questions as I got the answer to the previous question. And which is, to me, is the road. That's what keeps you moving forward. Getting, you answer one question that you might have internally, and you seek it out of that answer comes another question, just like we're having in this conversation, and my growth came from perceiving and watching other people's journey. It was really, and that's one of the most interesting things in life. I mean, I can tell you that I've seen journeys of people who've gone from like being a certain way to all of a sudden, they change and they correct whatever, and they go on, to be happier, more productive, and lovable human beings, and I think that every time I see somebody going on the wrong path, I think I look at it as a potential for somebody to like change their ways and find that where we're going, the God's will path, like on the tree of life, going into the straight and narrow, about things, finding order in their lives.
Yeah. It's an interesting, the idea of sort of observing other people's journeys and trying to take something from that. But I mean, I'd be sort of, it'd be almost criminal. I mean, I'm sure you get asked about Randy all the time. I know that's a very sort of, I know you must get.
It was his birthday yesterday. Yeah.
Well, that was, I was going to say, yeah. But I guess my question feeding off of that, rather than just throwing you some generic question, what did you kind of pick up from observing his journey, if you will, and sort of being a part of that?
Yeah, great question. But it seemed like Randy's journey was already set before I met him. So it was not a matter of watching his growth because he was growing naturally. He was growing before I met him. And it was just that pattern, growth pattern, you know, exponential growth as a musician and as a human being. He was, as a human being, I don't think he changed that much at a time when he could have changed, but he didn't. He just kept, his integrity. He had the highest level of musical integrity and as a human being of anybody I ever met. And it was the perfect timing was because up until 1978, every single band that I played in, mostly, was trying to survive, just to make some money, to make money. It was kind of like my high school, college period that you're learning and you're gathering information so you can apply that to the next level, which is joining a band whose sole existence was to get a record deal and become a recording and touring worldwide artist, which is what Quiet Riot in the 70s, the Randy Rhoads version, was all about. And for the first time, this is it. Our focus is just on music. There's no other distractions. Our focus is how we're going to get a record deal. And then after that, how we're going to tour or how we're going to perform and present or what original song we were going to work on so we could take it to the record labels. It was that very narrow laser focus that we had. And I got to say, Randy had the highest integrity of any musician. And I'll tell you why. He was born into not only a musical family, but an academia family. His mom and dad, professors. They still do a music school in Los Angeles called Musonia, which is where Randy learned and taught at. And so Randy's whole pure existence was to be a musician. That was it. And this happened before I met him. So to walk in and actually meet somebody who wasn't doing it because he wanted to be famous, or he's like in my case, I saw the Beatles and I saw the girls' reaction to the Beatles, and I wanted that. Of course, he wanted that too, but that wasn't why he picked up the guitar. He picked up the guitar because basically, at birth, he had a guitar, around. So it was like, and he started playing classical guitar and started reading music before he even played electric. So it was just like a cultural transition, social transition to actually now, he's hanging out with kids his own age and all the kids are into rock and roll. Well, okay, I'm going to play rock and roll so I can put a band and, that social interaction that prior to social media where people have to get out of their rooms and houses in order to interact with each other, And so even to the day he died, Randy was the finest example for me, still is, of musical integrity, because he just came from a whole different world.
So what do you think maybe sort of Randy's journey, if you like, might look like if he was, say, my age now or a bit younger? How do you think there's someone that might be, the next Randy Rhoads or the next Van Halen or whatever nowadays? How do you think that journey maybe might look different if he
I think it will look exactly the same because Randy was an accidental rock star. By that I mean, taking into consideration all his musical knowledge, all the years and desire to be a musician, to be a teacher. Randy spent more time teaching than he did actually performing while I was with him in Quiet Riot. He would teach every day for 8 hours, and then he would come over to rehearsal for an hour and a half, with Quiet Riot, or stay longer if we were working on new material, and then go back to the next day, teach another 8 hours, or more. And so he was more of a teacher. As a matter of fact, if you look at any photos of Randy performing live, there's a clarity and his playing, the way he holds the guitar, his fingering position, it looks like he's showing the first few rows what he's playing, which was his nature. He played like that, a lot of clarity. So I think that the desire, being a musician is a calling, has been a calling since troubadours or prior to that. Monks singing Gregorian chants. It's something that you love to do. You have no other choice. I mean, what drove Bach, to being one of the composers that, he wrote just about it. He had to write a piece, an original piece for his mass every Sunday. And then he wrote for his side project, which was, secular music, and that he was performing at restaurants around the town that he lived in with all these other musicians, and then he taught choir and wrote all the chorales, and so it's like this is what he did. It's like asking somebody who does let's say a painter. They're a painter. They get up in the morning, they face a blank canvas, and they create something. Well, musicians is exactly the same thing, because we have no other choice. We must, whether we're playing in front of thousands of people or by yourself in a room. It's the joy. I get so much joy of just. I do. I mean, I'm back. With Quiet Riot, and we do a lot. We just did about 70 shows this past year, but I also spend a lot of time every single day just me and my bass, and I have headphones and I listen to it, and either watching some music theory lesson online or just discovering. Sometimes I learn one little seed from lesson, just one little bit that I go, it sets a spark, and then before you know it, for the last hour, I have passed the lesson and gone into this whole different territory. This exploration, which is this one seed or something, and it's usually a perception of looking at your instrument, what you've been playing all these years, from a different angle. That's all it is. You're playing the same notes. We only got 12 notes to play with. But now I'm like, okay, I can approach this to get from here to here in a completely different way and make it sound musical.
Do you think that's maybe how you've been able to sort of maintain a sort of a career in it for so long? Do you think it's that ability or that desire to just keep picking new things up and sort of developing, I guess, tying it back into you as a person? Do you think that maybe that desire to find new things and to sort of understand new ideas, do you think that has helped you to just to help to get these more career-based opportunities? Do you think that's kind of tied in with that?
Yeah, because okay, going back, and I'm going to be esoteric here, it's the best way I can explain it. People talk about 360 degrees. There's more degrees than that. Why are we stuck on 360 degree? Oh, you made a 90-degree turn. No, within each one of those 90 degrees, there's other degrees in there. It's like we've been given 12 notes. Pythagoras came up with the intervals, and he came up with this mathematical equation and all that. But if you listen to others' music, like Indian music, there's notes, microtones within those notes, which exists in the universe. If you look at the music staff, it only goes out, like let's say the piano, the 88 keys, 88 notes. There's notes beyond that. That we might not be hearing as clearly, especially on the upper or the lower register, depending on how your hearing is. But it's just that we gravitate toward these notes that our ears, the human ears, can actually perceive, But there's more to it than that. And what I'm looking for is two things. I'm looking about the relationship that actually harmonically, every single note is part of the same family. They all relate to each other. So, we are taught, let's say, to play diatonically. In the 80s was one of the biggest diatonic periods in music. I mean, I can name you hits that I recorded on. Come on, Feel the Noise. That's one of the most diatonic songs I've ever played. If you go back to the Ozzy catalog, right, Randy was composing diatonically. You listen to beautifully, but still diatonic. You listen to Mr. Crowley, that's D minor. It's every chord in D minor. I mean, people might look at it as F major, but it's not. It's D minor because of the relationship of the fifth of the A to the D minor. Uh, Songs like Crazy Train, that's diatonic also, right? Which means that unless Randy's doing a solo and he might be playing a little, just maybe the blue note, makes it a little rock and roll, takes it away from being just purely diatonic with everything that he's playing because he's bending the notes. But what everything else that we played was basically diatonic to that key. And so music needs to become more than just that set of notes, playing chord tones or anything like that. Of course, there's a time and a place to apply that, but not all music should be like that. I was watching a TV show yesterday. I think it's called People's Choice. It's like an award show. And a lot of new talent came on, people I had no idea who they were. So I was just listening to their contributions to their music. And because rap, it's so monotone. There's no melody in the rap itself, and that's what's big on radio. Hip hop. A lot of the melodies that these singers they're actually singing, but it's a 3-note melody. That's how it's approached, like that, with no instrumental interludes, like a guitar solo. That's all gone. So there you get a lot of lyrical information. And to be honest with you, with me, it's an overload of words because it's kind of rap. It has the same content lyrically as a rap song would have, more just about, but with very minimal melodicism to it.
Yeah, it's tricky kind of I never like being that guy that just says, "Oh, pop music's rubbish," but I do find that there's a lot of the same stuff, I think. And it's interesting. I was listening to you talk to Rick Beato, I believe, talking about how Randy went and did more classically influenced stuff. Listens like Diary of a Madman or something,
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned Mr. Crowley, actually, because one of the first videos I ever saw as a young kid was you and Randy and Ozzy. I particularly remember sort of Randy's solos and stuff. Is it After Hours? Is that I can't remember.
Yeah, After Hours. That was the only one we did. And just to like basically encapsulate the thought that I was sharing with you, when you go from the Blizzard of Oz record which has all those diatonic songs, you go to Diary of a Madman. It's a completely different angle that he's using as a composer. Now he's expanding more. If you listen to Diary of a Madman, that's like that's a lesson in compositional theory. It's beautiful, and there's so many songs in there that are just like that, like Tonight. And I mean, I can just go down the list and break them down. But his compositional, and I would not say knowledge, because these are things that he knew, but Randy somehow knew that in order to have a platform, build a platform that bridges the Ozzy as an artist and the band Blizzard of Oz and the audience, was to start with something relatable. Relatable meaning Okay, if you listen to Crazy Train, that's the most iconic song Ozzy has, with the exception of the Black Sabbath era of Paranoid, right? Paranoid, Come on, Feel the Noise. They're both, like it, and it goes across the board. Okay, when you start getting to diatonic, and I can even tell you the same thing about Come on, Feel the Noise by Slade. Melodically, they are really nursery rhymes. Come on, feel the noise. Three blind mice. It has that familiarity diatonically. Once you start getting away from diatonic compositions, then your ear is more challenged. And you really have to be in the mood to hear something. And the presentation has to be great. The production, because otherwise your ear's gonna shut off and not apply the focus that it needs to actually internalize it.
Yeah, I find it so. Someone I always agree with on this is Marty Friedman. He talks about how he's not very good at listening to complex chords. He prefers to impose complex ideas in his lead playing over simpler chords, because that way you get to hear the strength of a power chord or something. But then
yes,
ideas on top, which I thought was an interesting take. Maybe.
Oh, absolutely. Marty Friedman is a outstanding and very unique musician, because he made the decision to move to Japan, and he's become the to go rock, the person that understands rock, traditional classical rock, influenced by the blues, but he understands what the Japanese audience likes. And I know this because I've done projects with him in Japan, where I was a part of this project called Animetal USA, and he was our arranger. He would take anime songs and arrange them to metal, but he bridged that, that anime and metal. How are we going to do this? Because, you have to get the approval of the composer in Japan. That's the way they do publishing. That we're honoring the song and the composer by this new interpretation of the music. So he was very specific about it, and he's got that whole baby metal and all these other projects that he worked with. He's got that nailed down. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal talent. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of we've covered quite a lot of stuff. Hopefully people, like I said, hopefully it's a chance just to talk about a few things. Obviously we've ended on a very musical kind of note, but just a chance for you to maybe talk about some things, I guess, above and beyond just the musical questions. But so if you're happy, rather than I suppose it's your morning, isn't it? It's my evening. I need to go and teach guitar and not actually. If you could come up with a question for the next guest, and maybe recommend an artist for the listeners to check out.
Okay, so this is going to be a musical guest.
Yeah, it'd be a musical guest of some sort. I don't like to say who it is because I feel like it might spoil the surprise. I suspect you may possibly know the person as well. Possibly.
Who's that?
Wouldn't need to know of them. You might not know them personally, but
okay.
Keep it secret. It's more interesting that way.
Okay, it's a secret. Okay. You have asked me so many questions that I would actually like to ask them, but I want to come up with something completely original and something that they might.
I'd take that as a compliment.
What would you like to learn about music that you have not learned yet? Of course, I mean, that's, basically is what areas of music or musical style, besides the one that you're known for, would you actually like to record and do something outside of what you're known for? Like with me, it would be Latin music. I grew up with Latin jazz. I I'm 72 years old, so I started listening to music before rock and roll existed. And in my culture, that was the norm. So that's the music in my head. Listening to Dizzy Gillespie, listening to Paquito de Rivera, which is another, but that's more of the modern, but traditional. Arturo Sandoval. These are people that have carried on the jazz, the Latin jazz tradition, and they're very pure with it. So, yeah, what kind of style that you're not known for would you actually maybe do a side project or do a bit of that in whatever you're actually musically recording with?
It's a good question. Yeah. I won't spoil it, but the next guy is definitely like a heavy metal guy. So there could be some interesting avenues for different, maybe surprising avenues. Yeah. And if you have an artist that you think deserves some love, any and every genre, or good to hear.
I would go definitely Adrian Vandenberg.
Nice.
Because he's you never know what he's gonna say.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah. I'll have to check him out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lastly, if there's anything you want to kind of promote to the world or plug it, then feel free to.
Yeah, next year, Quiet Riot, we're celebrating our 40th anniversary of the release of the Metal Health record, and we're going to be touring on that. There's going to be some surprises coming up next week. There's going to be a little surprise coming up, so be on the lookout for that.
Nice.
And that's about it. I wish everybody a wonderful holiday season.
Yeah. Will you be in
the
UK, home of metal?
Where? In
Birmingham, in the UK, home of metal.
Oh, Birmingham. I love Birmingham. Oh my God. That's the first place I had Indian food. And it spoiled it for me.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that, man. So thank you so much for
Well, thank you so much, Joe. God bless you.